On a storm-laden evening in the small, weathered town of Grimsby, a thin veil of relentless rain draped over the crooked rooftops and cobblestone streets. Each drop that fell seemed to carry with it a whisper of the old, forgotten tales that the town had buried in its heart. It was the kind of night that clung to your skin and chilled your bones, a perfect night for ghost stories. Cassandra, a young woman with a penchant for the paranormal, found herself drawn to the flickering lights of the old shanty, a local pub famed for its eerie history and even eerier clientele. The pub was nearly empty, save for a few huddled regulars and an old bartender named Mick, whose eyes seemed to hold centuries of secrets. "Evening, Cass," Mick greeted with a nod as she took a seat at the bar, her raincoat dripping a pool of water at her feet. "Evening, Mick. It's a perfect night for a story, don't you think?" Cassandra replied, her voice barely above the crackle of the fireplace that poured the cold dampness that seeped through the walls. Mash smirked, wiping down a glass with an old cloth. "It might be at that. What are you in the mood for? Ghosts, gals, or something a bit more sinister?" Cassandra leaned in, her curiosity piqued by the gleam in Mick's eye. "How about something true? Something that will make it hard for me to walk home alone tonight." Mick chuckled, a sound that seemed too large for his wiry frame. "True, you say? Well then, let me tell you about the Rainwalker of Grimsby." His voice dropped to a whisper as he began, the wind howling outside as if to listen. Not many speak of the Rainwalker these days, too afraid they might summon it. It's said on nights like this, when the rain falls heavy and the fog rolls in, you can see its figure roaming the streets. They say it's the spirit of old man Witherby, who went mad after his daughter disappeared in a storm some 50 years ago. Every rainy night, he searches for her, wailing into the wind, his eyes glowing with a ghostly light. Cassandra shivered, drawn into the story. Has anyone ever talked to him? The Rainwalker, I mean. Mick leaned closer, his voice dropping lower. Those who have, weren't left much in the way of sanity. They say he's searching for something or someone, and if you catch his eye, he'll think you're the one he's looking for. As Mick spun his tale, the wind outside grew fiercer, the rain battering the old windows like a barrage of whispers. Cassandra found herself glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see the Rainwalker peering back at her through the glass. Mick's story was interrupted by the sudden entrance of a stranger, drenched from head to toe, his hat pulled low over his eyes. He paused in the doorway, scanning the room with an intensity that made Cassandra's skin crawl. The stranger finally walked up to the bar, sitting a few stools down from her. His presence brought a palpable tension, the air thickening around them as if the storm itself had seeped into the room. Another lost soul out on a night like this? Mick asked, attempting to break the eerie silence that had fallen over the pub. The stranger just nodded, keeping his head down. Mick served him a drink and moved away, leaving a curious and somewhat uneasy Cassandra to ponder the identity of the newcomer. Unable to shake her unease, Cassandra decided to leave, her mind still reeling with the images of the Rainwalker. She offered a quick farewell to Mick and stepped out into the storm, the rain instantly soaking through her clothes. As she hurried down the street, the echo of her footsteps mingled with the relentless patter of the rain. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, her heart racing as she quickened her pace. Turning down an alley as a shortcut, she stopped dead in her tracks. There, in the faint glow of the street lamp, stood a figure, tall and shrouded in a tattered cloak, its eyes glowing faintly beneath the hood. Cassandra's breath caught in her throat as the figure slowly raised its head, and in a voice that was a mournful echo of the wind, it spoke her name. Cassandra. Frozen in fear, she could only watch as the figure approached, the details of its visage obscured by shadow and rain. As it came closer, the air around her grew colder, the rain turning to a mist that seemed to whisper old, forgotten words. The figure reached out, its hand pale and translucent, and as its fingers brushed against her arm, a chill deeper than any winter wind swept through her. Cassandra felt the very air around her seem to thicken, the whispers growing louder, as if the rain itself was speaking in tongues. "I've been waiting for you," the figure murmured, its voice a mixture of grief and malice. It stepped closer, the glow from its eyes intensifying. Cassandra, mustering every shred of courage, tried to move away, but her feet felt as if they were rooted to the cobblestone beneath her. The alley twisted and elongated, shadows dancing like mad specters on the walls, transforming the space into a corridor of nightmares. "Who are you?" Cassandra managed to choke out, her voice trembling with fear. "I am what remains of the lost and forgotten," the figure replied, its tone hollow as if every word was an effort of immense strain. "I am the keeper of Grimsby's darkest night," the echo of its silent screams. "You have summoned me with your curiosity and fear." Cassandra's mind raced, images of mixed tales mingling with the ghastly apparition before her. She remembered tales of an old curse that had fallen over Grimsby, one that haunted the living with the despair of those who had vanished into the night. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper against the howling wind. "You bear the mark," the figure said, pointing to her arm where its touch had left a faint, glowing sigil, a symbol she had never noticed before but now seemed eerily familiar. It was the same symbol she had seen etched into the walls of the old shanty, hidden beneath layers of paint and wallpaper. The realization hit her like a wave. Her fascination with the paranormal had unwittingly tied her to the town's spectral legacy. She was part of the story now, a character in a tale of ghostly wanderings and cursed souls. "You must help me," the apparition continued, its form becoming more defined, less shadowy. It was a man, or had been once, with sorrowful eyes that spoke of centuries of torment. "Help me find peace, or be doomed to wander with me." Cassandra felt the weight of his words, a burden that seemed to drench her more thoroughly than the rain. How could she possibly help a spirit? And what would happen if she failed? As if sensing her thoughts, the figure's expression softened, becoming less menacing and more pleading. "The key lies with the Rainwalker. He knows the path to what was lost. You must find him before the next moon fades, or all will be lost." Before she could ask more, the sound of footsteps splashing through puddles echoed down the alley. The figure recoiled, the light in its eyes flickering like dying embers. "Be swift, Cassandra. The shadows grow hungry." With that, the apparition vanished, dissipating into a mist that was quickly swallowed by the night. Cassandra stood alone, the sigil on her arm burning cold against her skin, the only proof that the encounter had been real. Heart pounding, she hurried out of the alley, the sense of being watched lingering like an unshakable shadow. The town around her seemed different now, every shadow seemed deeper, every whisper of the wind a warning. Rushing back to the safety of her home, she locked herself in, her mind racing with the apparition's warning and the task before her. How was she to find the Rainwalker? And what shadows lurked, waiting to devour her if she failed. Her only clue lay in Mick's stories, the old bartender who knew more than he let on. Tomorrow, she would return to the old shanty to press him for answers. But for tonight, she was alone with her fear, the rain tapping against her windows like impatient fingers, reminding her of the ticking clock, of the moon that waned with each passing night. As she prepared for bed, a soft, mournful wail rose above the storm's howl, a sound that chilled her to the bone. The rainwalker was out there, somewhere, and her journey into the dark heart of Grimsby's curse was just beginning. The storm raged on outside, casting a haunting symphony of wind and rain against the fragile glass of Cassandra's windows. She lay in bed, her mind a whirlwind of terror and confusion, mirroring the chaos outside. The tale of the rainwalker and her chilling encounter with the spectral figure had woven a tapestry of fear that gripped her heart with icy fingers. Unable to sleep, she rose from her bed and moved to the window, peering out into the tempest. The streets of Grimsby were empty, swallowed by the dark and stormy night. The rainwalker's mournful wail echoed once more, a distant, sorrowful sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It was as if the wind itself carried his grief, spreading it across the town, a shared reminder of their cursed existence. Cassandra's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp knock at her door. Startled, she froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Who could be out on such a night? The clock on the wall showed it was nearly 3 in the morning. No sane person would be wandering about at this hour, especially not in this weather. Another knock, more insistent this time, jolted her from her frozen state. Swallowing her fear, she grabbed a candlestick from the dresser, a meager weapon, but it was all she had, and tiptoed to the door. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice quivering. A voice came through the storm, muffled by the wind and rain. "It's me, Mick from the pub. Please, Cassandra, you need to let me in." Mick? What could he possibly want at this hour? Cassandra's mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Nevertheless, she unbolted the door and opened it a crack, the wind fighting to push it open further. Mick stumbled in, soaked to the bone, his face pale and drawn. He looked around nervously, as if he were being chased. "Lock it." Quickly, he urged. Cassandra did as he said, her hands shaking as she secured the door. "Mick, what's going on? What are you doing here so late?" Mick paced the room, wringing his hands. "I couldn't wait till morning. It's about the rainwalker, about your encounter tonight. There's more you need to know, things I should have told you before." Cassandra set the candlestick down on the table, her curiosity piqued despite her fear. "Tell me," she demanded. Mick sighed, his eyes haunted. "It's not just old man Witherby's spirit that haunts this town. There's a darker force at play, one that feeds on the grief and fear he generates. It's a curse, yes, but one that's been carefully orchestrated by someone or something much more sinister. A darker force." Cassandra repeated, her thoughts racing. "But why? And what does it want?" "That, I don't know," Mick admitted. "But I believe it's using the rainwalker as a vessel, a way to gather what it needs. Fear, despair, these things are powerful, and they are what this entity craves." Cassandra absorbed his words, a sense of dread settling over her. "So, what can we do? How do we stop it?" Mick shook his head, frustration etched on his features. I'm not sure, but I think it starts with the Rainwalker. We need to find out what he's looking for, what he needs to find peace. Maybe then we can break the cycle, weaken whatever holds this curse together. Determined, Cassandra nodded. Then we'll start first thing in the morning. We'll go to the places he's been seen, look for clues, anything that might help. Mick looked out the window, the first hints of dawn coloring the sky a deep blue-gray. We don't have much time, Cassandra. The next moon phase is in 3 days. If we don't figure it out by then, I fear what might happen. The storm seemed to wane with his words, a momentary peace falling over Grimsby as if the town itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter of its tormented history to unfold. As Mick settled in for the remainder of the night, Cassandra returned to her window, watching the first light of dawn creep over the horizon. The day would bring its challenges, and she needed to be ready. Little did she know, the path she was about to embark on would lead her deeper into the shadows of Grimsby than she had ever imagined, to secrets long buried and truths that might have been better left undiscovered. Outside, the last echoes of the Rainwalker's wails faded into the morning, a haunting lullaby for the cursed town of Grimsby, its melody a chilling prelude to the horrors that awaited. As the first rays of sun cut through the retreating clouds, casting long shadows across the damp cobblestones, Cassandra and Mick prepared for their daunting task. They gathered old town records, maps, and newspaper clippings, anything that might hold a clue to the Rainwalker's origins or the dark force using him. Their search led them to the local library, a grand old building with creaking shelves and dust-laden books. It was there, in the dimly lit archives, that they uncovered an old diary belonging to the town's founder, Edgar Grimsby. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. Cassandra's fingers trembled as she turned the pages, each one revealing more of the town's dark past. Edgar wrote of a pact, a desperate deal made with a shadowy figure that promised prosperity for Grimsby in exchange for an annual tribute. But the tribute was not gold or goods, it was fear, despair, the very emotions that the Rainwalker now harvested. Edgar's entries grew increasingly frantic, his handwriting shaky as he described the growing horror of what he had unleashed. The creature comes with the storm, its eyes like hollow pits, its hands reaching for the souls of the frightened, Edgar had written in one entry. I fear I have doomed us all. As Cassandra read aloud, Mick's face grew pale. This could be what's powering the curse. This creature, whatever it is, it's feeding off the town, and it's using the Rainkeeper as its harvester. The realization hit them like a cold wave. They now had a possible motive and a source of the curse, but the solution remained elusive. How were they to break a pact made centuries ago by the town's founder? Determined to find an answer, they continued their search through the library's archives. Hours passed, the only sounds in the quiet room the rustle of pages and the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Suddenly, Cassandra stumbled upon another entry, a final note scrawled in the margin of Edgar's diary. There is a way to end the pact, but the cost is great. A sacrifice must be made, one that equals the initial offering. Only then can the chains be broken. A chill ran down Cassandra's spine. A sacrifice? What kind of sacrifice? Mick looked grave. I don't know, but it sounds like we might have to find out. Armed with this new information, They left the library as evening approached, the setting sun casting long shadows over the town. The weight of their discovery hung heavy between them. They needed to plan, to prepare for whatever might come, but first, they had to find the Rainwalker. Their search took them through the twisting streets of Grimsby, following the path laid out in the old tales and sightings. As night fell, a familiar mist began to roll in from the sea, shrouding the town in a ghostly veil. The atmosphere thickened, charged with a palpable sense of impending doom. They found themselves at the old docks, where the fog was thickest, obscuring the dilapidated boats and the rotted wooden planks of the pier. The water lapped quietly at the shore, a soft, eerie sound in the quiet night. Then, from the mist, a figure emerged. The Rainwalker, his form more ghastly than Cassandra had remembered, his eyes glowing with a spectral light. He stopped at the edge of the pier, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if waiting for something or someone. Mick stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear that clenched his heart. "We know about the pact, about the curse. We want to help you find peace." The Rainwalker turned, his face a mask of sorrow and torment. "Peace," he echoed, his voice a hollow whisper. "There is no peace for me, not until the pact is fulfilled." "But there is a way," Cassandra interjected, her voice firm. "A sacrifice can break the curse. Tell us what needs to be done." The Rainwalker's gaze shifted between them, a flicker of hope passing through his haunted eyes. "The sacrifice," he began, then paused, looking back at the sea as if drawing strength from its timeless waves. "The sacrifice will require more than you may be willing to give." Cassandra and Mick exchanged a determined look. They had come too far to turn back now, whatever the cost. "We're ready," Cassandra said, her voice resolute. The Rainwalker nodded slowly, turning to face them fully. "Then follow me," he said, leading them into the fog, deeper into the mystery of the curse and toward the dark heart of Grimsby's haunted history. As they disappeared into the mist, the night seemed to close in around them, the fog enveloping them like a shroud, hiding their path from the prying eyes of the world beyond. Each step forward felt heavy, as if the very air around them thickened with the secrets of the past and the uncertainty of their future. The Rainwalker led them along the desolate shoreline, his movements fluid yet eerily silent, blending with the swirling fog that seemed to move at his command. The muted sounds of the water slapping against the dock were a somber background to the tension that mounted with each passing moment. Cassandra and Mick followed closely, their senses heightened to the point where every slight sound made them tense. The air was thick with the salty tang of the sea, intermingled with a faint, almost imperceptible scent of decay. It was as if the dock itself mourned its long-lost vibrancy, now just a forgotten relic at the mercy of the encroaching fog. They walked for what seemed like hours, the boundary between time and distance blurred by the monotonous lapping of the waves and the unchanging grey veil that surrounded them. Finally, the Rainwalker stopped at a particularly decrepit part of the pier, his figure a dark silhouette against the less dense fog that hovered over the water. "This is the place," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper, yet carrying in it the weight of unspoken sorrows. "Here is where the pact was sealed, and here it must be undone." Cassandra and Mick exchanged a glance, their faces pale under the ghostly light of the fog. "What needs to be done?" Mick asked, his voice steady despite the palpable dread that clung to his words. The Rainwalker turned to face the dark waters, his back to them as he spoke. The creature that binds this curse feeds on fear and despair, the very emotions it sows. To break the pact, you must confront it here, in its domain, and offer it something it cannot corrupt or consume. And what is that? Cassandra asked, her throat tight with fear. Hope, the Rainwalker replied, turning to face them. His eyes, glowing with a faint, otherworldly light, seemed to pierce through the fog, reaching into their very souls. Pure, unyielded hope. The kind that shines even in the deepest darkness. Cassandra felt a chill run down her spine. Hope was a fragile thing, especially in a place as steeped in sorrow and fear as Grimsby. Yet, as she met the Rainwalker's gaze, she felt a flicker of something warm kindle within her, a resolve that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. How do we give it hope? She asked, her voice firmer now. The Rainwalker pointed to the old lighthouse, barely visible in the distance, its form a ghostly sentinel against the night sky. There you will find a beacon. Light it, and let it shine through the night. Let it be a symbol of your defiance against the darkness, a declaration that even in the face of ancient evils, hope can still prevail. Mick nodded, understanding the symbolism, but aware of the danger as well. And the creature? Will it just let us do this? The Rainwalker's expression darkened. It will try to stop you. It will throw your deepest fears, your darkest memories against you. You must not falter. The light must burn through the night until dawn. With a deep, almost reverent nod, Cassandra stepped forward. Then we will not fail, she said, her voice echoing slightly off the water. The Rainwalker gave them a look that held centuries of pain and hope mingled together. I cannot enter the lighthouse with you, but I will guard the pier. Hurry now, the night wanes, and with it, our chance. With no further words, Cassandra and Mick turned towards the lighthouse, their steps quick and determined. Behind them, the Rainwalker's silhouette blended back into the fog, a guardian between them and whatever horrors lay waiting in the shadows. As they approached the lighthouse, the air grew colder, the fog thicker, as if the very atmosphere conspired to keep them from their goal. The lighthouse loomed above them, its structure an imposing figure against the oppressive night. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of old salt and rust. The stairs creaked ominously under their weight as they ascended, each step a testament to the lighthouse's age and disrepair. Reaching the top, they found the beacon, a large, old-fashioned lamp that looked like it hadn't been lit in decades. Mick worked quickly, cleaning the glass and checking the wick, while Cassandra searched for a box of matches she had brought along. Finally, everything was set. Mick nodded at Cassandra, who struck a match and lit the wick. The flame sputtered at first, struggling against the dampness, but then took hold, growing steadier and brighter by the second. As the beacon flared to life, casting a warm, golden light that cut through the fog like a sword through shadow. The light from the lighthouse began to pulse, a heartbeat of brightness against the dark, oppressive night. As the light grew stronger, the air around the lighthouse seemed to crackle with electricity, the atmosphere charged with anticipation and the impending confrontation. Mick and Cassandra stood back, watching the beacon's light piercing the darkness. But as the light brightened, a deep, ominous growling echoed up from the base of the lighthouse, shaking the very foundation. The air turned frigid, the temperature dropping so suddenly that their breath fogged before them. "They're coming," Cassandra said, her voice tight with tension. "Who?" Mick asked, although a part of him already knew the answer. The creature, and whatever it commands, she replied, gripping the railing as another growl, louder and more menacing than before, vibrated through the lighthouse. They could hear the scuttling and skittering of dark forms ascending the staircase, a cacophony of whispers and wails that melded into a symphony of terror. The entities driven by the dark force were coming for them, drawn to the beacon's light, or perhaps angered by the challenge it represented. "We need to keep the light burning," Mick shouted over the din of the approaching horror. He grabbed a nearby oil can and began to feed the beacon, ensuring the flame would not falter. Cassandra stood ready, holding a makeshift weapon, a heavy piece of driftwood she had found inside the lighthouse. Her eyes were fixed on the staircase, waiting for the first glimpse of their adversaries. As the first of the creatures emerged into the light, it recoiled, its form shuddering in the bright light. It was a ghastly thing, its body twisted and malformed, its eyes empty pools of despair. More followed, each as grotesque as the last, their forms barely human, twisted by the darkness that had consumed them. But the light held them at bay. Each step they attempted towards the beacon caused invisible pain, their forms smoked and charred in the light's purity. Yet, they pressed on, driven by an insatiable hatred and a hunger for the dark. Cassandra swung her driftwood with a primal scream, connecting with the nearest creature and sending it tumbling back down the stairs. "We can't let them reach the light," she cried out, turning to strike another. Mick continued to fuel the beacon, his actions mechanical, driven by desperation. The flame roared louder, a beacon of hope in a sea of darkness, its light now a blazing inferno that painted the walls in hues of gold and orange. The creatures wailed and thrashed, the light burning away the darkness that sustained them. One by one, they fell back, unable to withstand the purity of the light. And as the last of them retreated, a deafening silence fell over the lighthouse. Mick and Cassandra, exhausted, watched as the dawn began to break, the first light of day mingling with the golden glow of the beacon. The creatures had vanished, but the threat lingered in the air, a palpable tension that suggested the battle was not yet over. They looked out over the sea, where the fog began to lift, revealing the silhouette of the rainwalker at the end of the pier. He stood motionless, watching them, his figure no longer menacing, but somehow sad and resigned. "The light holds," Mick said, his voice a mixture of relief and weariness. "But for how long?" Cassandra leaned against the railing, her eyes on the horizon where the sky turned a soft pink. "As long as we keep fighting," she said. "As long as we keep hoping." As the sun rose, casting long shadows and warm light across Grimsby, the town seemed to awaken from a long slumber. The curse was broken, the pact undone, but the echoes of the night's terror lingered, a reminder of the darkness that once ruled their lives. And in the new day, Cassandra and Mick knew their fight might not be over. The darkness could return, the creatures could regather, but they had won a significant victory. They had brought light back to Grimsby, a beacon of hope that would shine, steadfast and enduring, against whatever darkness might come. As the sun climbed higher, the rainwalker faded away, his curse lifted, a soul finally at peace. And in the light of a new day, Cassandra and Mick looked out at the sea, knowing they had changed their town's destiny, ready to face whatever challenges might come, with the light as their guide. As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, the town of Grimsby slowly stirred to life, unaware of the battle that had raged through the night. Cassandra and Mick stood at the top of the lighthouse, watching the horizon brighten, a sense of accomplishment mingling with their exhaustion. The beacon, still glowing strong and steady, served as a testament to their resilience. The peace was palpable, yet as they watched the sea calm and the town awaken, they knew the darkness they'd fought was not destroyed, merely driven back into the shadows where it would lurk, waiting for a chance to rise again. But for now, the threat was at bay, and the town was safe. Cassandra looked over at Mick, seeing the fatigue etched deep in his face, but also the determination that had carried them through the night. "We did it, Mick. For now, Grimsby is safe." Mick nodded, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "Yes, but we'll need to stay vigilant. The darkness has been here longer than us. It knows how to wait, how to hide." "You think it will come back?" Cassandra asked, a slight tremor in her voice. "It might," Mick admitted. "But next time, we'll be ready. We've shown it can be beaten." Together, they descended the lighthouse steps, the beacon's light casting long shadows behind them as they walked. They emerged into the fresh morning air, the scent of the sea mingling with the earthy aroma of rain-soaked earth, a scent of renewal. As they walked back toward the town, they noticed the townspeople beginning their day, oblivious to the night's events but feeling an unexplained lightness in their hearts. Children laughed as they headed to school, shopkeepers swept their front steps, and neighbors greeted each other with smiles. It was as if the whole town had been lifted from a long, oppressive dream. Cassandra and Mick reached the town square, where the first hints of normalcy resumed. Here, Cassandra paused, looking back towards the lighthouse that stood vigilant at the town's edge. "It feels like we've turned a page," she remarked. "Yes," Mick replied, "but it's a long book, Cass. Who knows how many chapters we have ahead?" Cassandra smiled slightly, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "However many there are, we'll face them together. Grimsby isn't just a place of shadows and whispers anymore. It's a place of light, too. And as long as people remember to keep the light burning, the darkness can never truly win." Mick placed a hand on her shoulder, nodding in agreement. "Let's keep the light burning then, for as long as we can." They turned and walked back towards the heart of the town, their shadows long and their steps determined. As they integrated back into the flow of everyday life, they carried with them the knowledge of the darkness they had combated and the light they had rekindled. In the days that followed, life in Grimsby slowly returned to normal, but with a new undercurrent of awareness. Tales of the night when the beacon burned bright and drove back the darkness circulated quietly, a shared secret among the town's residents. They were tales of terror and triumph, of darkness and light, woven into the fabric of Grimsby's history, to be passed down through generations. And every year, on the anniversary of that night, the townspeople would gather at the lighthouse to light the beacon, not out of fear, but in celebration of the light that guarded them. It was a new tradition, one that honored both the memory of the rainwalker and the spirit of hope that had saved them. Cassandra often stood by the lighthouse on those nights, looking out over the sea, feeling the warmth of the beacon's fire against her face. And though the air around her was filled with the laughter and chatter of her fellow townspeople, she could sometimes hear, carried on the wind, a whisper of thanks from the soul she had helped set free, a soul that walked no more in the rain, but in the eternal light of peace. The darkness may return, as darkness always does. But in Grimsile, the light shines ever brighter, a beacon of hope in the night, a steadfast sentinel against the shadows. And as long as the light burns, there will always be a way to push back the darkness, a way to fight, a way to win.